If you were to pick one thing to magically erase from existence that would bring all of modern life to a screeching halt, your best option would probably be magnets.
You are surrounded by magnets. Magnets are there in hard drives. I should do the list. The list is amazing. I knew they exist. When I put it in a list, I was like, whoa.
Take apart your cell phone, and you'll find a multitude of magnets inside. In the speaker and microphone, in the vibrating motor, stabilizing the camera lens. There are even tiny magnets on the circuit board. It's no exaggeration to say, no magnets, no modern world. And they're about to become even more important. As the world tries to become less dependent on fossil fuels, magnets and the multi-billion-dollar industry behind them are the key to many clean energy technologies, including some crazy futuristic ones.
This is the fundamental building block of our fusion technology.
But there's a big problem with our VIMs, very important magnets, that could derail the whole project of slowing climate change.
The supply chain of those is a challenge. But about 90% of that material is processed in China. And so the concern is that if there's not enough magnets to go around, there'll be a restriction in supply.
Which country control the magnetism, control the world?
So inventors around the globe are creating new kinds of magnets that could save our planet and our face-melting riffs. That'll make sense later.
Does it ever get old playing with magnets?
Oh my goodness, look at this. No. Magnets are fascinating, right? Every single moment they can surprise you. It feels like it has its own character. It has its own free will. At times we want to crush it, we want to scream at it, and then we love it again. Yeah.
Caroline Mulder is a magnet scientist. She spends her time trying to make better, stronger magnets.
This is our daily life, right? Trying to get this material have the most amazing magnetic properties that we can harvest. Moment of truth. Voila! Magnets. It's a wealth of intrigue for a scientist or an engineer, and even more interesting if you can make a product that can actually change the world for the better with it.
The kind of magnets Caroline makes are called permanent magnets. That is, metals that are magnetic on their own, as opposed to electromagnets, which only become magnetic when electric current flows around them. Permanent magnets are a big business. In 2023, about $38 billion worth of these metals were produced globally. And they're particularly important for clean energy technologies like electric vehicles and wind turbines. Without magnets, these things simply wouldn't work. Why? Well, let's look at an electric vehicle motor. When you turn on the motor, electricity flows into this metallic shaft, creating a magnetic field. That doesn't do much on its own, but look what happens when we add these permanent magnets. Their magnetic fields push against the central magnetic field. That makes the shaft rotate, and that makes the car go. Thanks, magnets. What about a wind turbine? Well, it's just the opposite process. The movement of the blades causes a magnet to spin around a central wire, which creates an electric current in the wire and generates electricity. It's like the motor in reverse. One turns electricity into motion, the other, motion into electricity. So, our magnetic friends spin around happily, making and using clean energy, and everything's great, right? Well, here's the problem.
Most permanent magnets today, used in wind turbines or electric car motors, come from using rare earth metals, typically neodymium.
Rare earths are metals that are only found in the Earth's crust in trace amounts, a few parts per million. And 92% of the world's rare earth magnets come from one place, China.
So it's not like rare earth metals, or neodymium specifically, is only found in China. It's that China has built over years, through government investment and private investment, a whole supply chain all the way from mining to the final product in the cheapest way possible. And that's made it really difficult for any other country to get into the neodymium game.
To see why China made that investment, look no further than the streets of Shanghai. More than half the vehicles sold here in 2024 had electric motors, which need those rare earth magnets to run.
Here in Shanghai, you see all these cars with green license plates, which means that they're EVs. I mean, basically, Chinese EVs are everywhere, and not just in the big cities. The Chinese EV industry is now the biggest in the world. I mean, how was China able to sort of become this incredible EV market? A lot of that has to do with the government. Chinese EV makers can depend on China for the supply chain, rare earths as well as rare earth magnets. Concentrated supply chains allow a lot of EV makers to obtain stable supply and manage their costs. But on the flip side, though, China's dominance of all these materials has given China pricing power, and other countries are vulnerable to policy swings in Beijing.
A small incident in 2010 exposed just how dependent the rest of the world is on Chinese rare earth metal supply. There was a Chinese vessel that was captured by the Japanese Coast Guard because they thought that it had entered Japanese water illegally, and Japan wouldn't release those fishermen. So China threatened Japan, according to some reports, that it will cut off the supply of rare earth metals to the Japanese electronics industry. And that caused a firestorm in the markets. Suddenly, rare earth metal prices skyrocketed, and that created this perception that countries needed to not just think about energy security, but they also needed to think about material security.
In Europe, efforts are underway to find local sources of rare earths. This site in Norway is being explored as a possible source of neodymium and other elements.
We are having the biggest deposit of rare earths in Europe. It's so important because there is absolutely no mining of rare earths in Europe today. And we are totally dependent on the supply from China. The demand is growing. We all need these materials for the future.
But establishing a whole new supply chain is an uphill battle.
This is the entrance to where we are finding the rare earth elements. It's difficult to open a new mine. It's permitting, we have neighbors, and it's very expensive. The first phase will be approximately €1 billion.
This mine won't start producing at scale for more than a decade, and the pace of development of new rare earth mines around the world has been slow.
Of course, it's a big challenge to compete against China, so we have a long way to go.
So new mines could be part of the answer, eventually. But what if this geopolitical problem had a more science-y solution?
My name is Jianping Wen. I'm professor at the University of Minnesota. Magnetism is magic, still is magic to me, same as when I was a college student.
Originally from China, Jianping has been working on a new kind of magnet. And he's been at it for a very long time.
This material I work on for 20 years, and it's called the iron nitride magnet.
Iron and nitrogen, two of the most abundant elements, no rare earths required. A magnet like that could solve the rare earth supply chain problem and be $1 billion business.
A nitrogen atom.
But it's not as easy as it sounds. Finding a stable molecular structure for iron nitride is a notoriously tricky problem.
You know, it's a very hard materials to make, and that scares away a lot of people. So that's why I step in. I feel I can solve these problems.
He and his students built these specialized machines from scratch and got to work. By 2013, they were getting good, but not great results.
Performance of this material is still not good enough. I think if you ask anyone to invest to see this material can be replaced rare earth permanent magnet, no one will say yes.
But Jianping was wrong. Investors had magnet fever. He started a company, Niron Magnetics, that secured more than $100 million in funding. But the journey from lab to product was just getting started.
The genesis of Niron was indeed Professor Jianping's work at the University of Minnesota. What we had to figure out then is, well, how are we going to make this and scale the product? Iron nitride is a little bit tricky. It's a real challenge to make and scale a material and do it cost effectively. And so the last 10 years have really been focused around developing a process that is scalable.
We settled on this nanoparticle approach. And how we do that is we start with making iron oxide nanoparticles, basically highly engineered rust.
In this stage, the rust is not terribly magnetic. We have to process it further to take it from the iron oxide phase into the iron nitride. You can see the material becomes much more magnetic. In order to turn it into a magnet, we have to take a further step and take the powder and make it very alignable. And so you can see that the particles form these chains or needles, if you will. This allows us to get the right structure when we compact this material into a finished magnet. Oh, there's a nice one. It's always fun to play with magnets, right?
After years of perfecting this process, Niron says it's about ready to ship. Its first target market is audio, yet another industry with magnets at its core.
In speakers, it's the magnet behind the cone that drives the actual cone to go up and down and vibrate. We recently made an electric guitar. We used that at our ribbon cutting ceremony. What picks up the sound or the vibration of the strings are guitar pickups, and they're made from magnets.
Told you it would make sense later. But beyond cool guitar dads, Niron hopes its magnets can have an impact on all kinds of clean energy technologies. It's raised more than $30 million from car makers like GM and Stellantis, which are interested in using iron nitride for their growing EV lines, something Niron says will be possible in 3 to 5 years. And the company claims that with further development, its magnets could become the strongest permanent magnets ever. But iron nitride does have one major drawback. It tends to lose its magnetism in the presence of other magnets.
The area that's different to, I would say, rare earth materials today is it has more moderate, what we call coercivity, which is this resistance to demagnetization. In speakers, that doesn't really matter because the magnet is static, but in motors, it's spinning, and so it experiences other magnetic fields in the motor.
So many problems. Even now, Niron still give me the challenge, how can we improve the performance? Right now, the performance is still not good enough for all the application. I believe, we need to invest more on the fundamental research.
If Niron gets past these hurdles, its magnets could become essential to the clean energy technologies of the present. But what about the future? Something more sci-fi. Not $1 billion business, but $1 trillion business. Well, there's a magnet for that too.
What we're trying to do is develop fusion technology that we could build around the world as power plants. These types of machines that use very large magnets to basically hold a star. And we're really leveraging new types of magnets to make them smaller, faster, and more powerful.
Founded in 2018, Commonwealth Fusion Systems is the brainchild of some physics nerds with a dream: to finally take fusion from a science experiment to real-world power source. And they think their unique magnets are the key to making this happen.
The magnets that we're building are the strongest in the world for their size. Strong enough to actually lift an aircraft carrier if we wanted to try.
So what exactly do magnets have to do with fusion? Buckle up. It's about to get cosmic.
Nuclear fusion, the same reaction that gives the sun its energy.
A nuclear fusion reactor is trying to replicate what the sun does, but on Earth. And that is no small feat. The sun is essentially taking hydrogen and compressing it to make helium. In the process, it produces a lot of energy. But the sun is 1,000,000 times bigger than the Earth. I think that's right.
Close enough.
And so its gravitational force is enormous, and it's able to use that gravitational force to compress all that hydrogen into helium.
On Earth, we don't have all that gravity to work with. Luckily, we can use heat instead.
And that's what a tokamak reactor does. It's essentially a bagel-shaped reactor made up of magnets on the outside that hold together hydrogen in the form of plasma that is superheated to 100 million degrees Celsius.
And because plasma has an electric charge, it reacts to magnetic fields, so the magnets can contain it.
The world over the last 50 years has built about 150 tokamaks. We actually understand the physics really well of how these specific devices work, but the engineering of the magnets is really hard.
At MIT, we were running a tokamak that used copper, so magnets made out of copper, that were some of the strongest magnets in the world. And we were getting really good results. But we knew that that magnet technology in that machine of copper wouldn't make a power plant, that you would spend all your energy just running the magnet.
With a copper electromagnet, some energy is always lost to heat because of electrical resistance. You need to pump more electricity through the magnets than the fusion power can create, meaning you end up in the red. So what do? Well, here we need to introduce you to a new kind of magnet, a fabulous, freaky, I freaking love science kind of magnet, the superconductor.
My name is Daniel Davis. I'm a research faculty here at the National High Magnetic Field Lab, and I work on making superconducting magnets.
Superconductors have all kinds of strange properties. Under the right conditions, their magnetic field can actually make them levitate.
We have to cool it down by placing it in liquid nitrogen. It will try to expel the magnetic field around it, and that will lock it in place at a certain height above the superconducting track.
That, in scientific terms, is pretty sweet. But the property that makes them so useful for fusion is right there in the name, superconductor.
It's a material that has zero electrical resistance. So that means it can carry current without generating any heat.
Unlike copper magnets, which lose energy to heat, superconductors don't, which gets your energy investment closer to turning a profit. But there's another problem.
Most of the superconductors that exist are low-temperature superconductors. And when physicists say low, they mean really low.
Like the temperature of outer space.
Like close to absolute zero.
We're talking low.
Like low, really low.
And it turns out, magnets don't like to be that cold. The extreme temperature limits the strength of their magnetic field. To compensate, you have to make them bigger, way bigger.
You know, it takes a lot of work to build something big. It gets very expensive. Like the amount of money you need to spend on something to get just the first one can get very, very expensive.
That's exactly what's happening with ITER, a giant fusion reactor currently under construction in France that uses superconducting magnets. Look at this thing, it's huge. And as a result, it's projected to cost as much as $65 billion. So, to make fusion smaller, cheaper, and more practical, Commonwealth's founders needed a whole new kind of magnet.
The question was like, would that material ever happen? And it wasn't until the early 2000s that we could really see that that material was going to happen. That there would be a new type of superconductor. And it's not a wire, it's a weird thing, it's a film. And it won the Nobel Prize like months after it was discovered.
So this is a material called HTS, or high temperature superconductor. It is literally, it comes out in a tape. It's probably kind of hard to see on the camera. It's very thin. It's actually mostly copper and steel, but there's a very, very, very thin layer inside of this that is high temperature superconducting material.
High temperature, in this case, is still wildly cold, but not quite outer space cold. And that was the breakthrough that Commonwealth needed. Magnets made with this material can create a stronger magnetic field, so they don't have to be so massive.
You can shrink the size of the device by a factor of 10. Basically, it allows us to make things smaller, which makes things cheaper and makes things faster, to get fusion to a spot where we can make energy from it.
So we're standing at the front of our magnet production line. So this is our very first station in the process where we make our pancakes. And a pancake is a layer of one of the magnets. We insert our superconducting tape into the spiral shape around the pancake. This is actually one of many stacks that we have in the factory of completed pancakes that we're now getting ready to make into full magnets.
Is it satisfying to be like, yes, we got a full stack?
Oh yeah, when we first moved into the factory, it took us about 20 days to complete a pancake. Now we're actually producing one a day.
Once completed, the magnets get stuck into this cooling chamber for testing. Liquid nitrogen and helium are pumped in to get the magnets cold. Then a super strong electric current is turned on.
So we're going to put in up to 35,000 amps of current into the magnet. And to put that in perspective, you charge your phone at night with 1 amp. So we could charge 35,000 cell phones all at once with this equipment.
Do you ever feel nervous walking under this lid?
No, we did a lot of structural analysis and no safety issue there.
Do you know how much that weighs?
A lot.
Nuclear fusion has been worked on for decades, but it's only really in the last 2 decades that private industry has become serious about investing in nuclear fusion. In that period, about $7 or $8 billion of private investment has gone into about a dozen nuclear fusion startups around the world.
One of these investors is Breakthrough Energy Ventures, a VC firm started by Bill Gates to fund early-stage clean energy startups.
So Breakthrough is very bullish on nuclear fusion. We have invested in 7 nuclear fusion companies. The first one that we did, and the one that's received the most attention, is Commonwealth Fusion Systems. They raised, I think, $100 million in their first round and raised nearly $2 billion in their Series B. The idea that tokamaks are still experimental and risky and a long ways off, it's really not true. The old joke about fusion is that it's 20 years away and it always will be. That is absolutely not the case for magnetic confinement fusion at this point.
In this room right here, the tokamak will be built. So these big orange structures here are assembly tooling, so temporary stands. We'll put all the magnets up on them, and then we'll bring that machine together over that center white hole in the middle, and that's where the final kind of tokamak location will be.
If its demonstration tokamak works, Commonwealth plans to complete its first commercial fusion plant by the early 2030s. But it's important to throw some cold water on all of this, because fusion power is still basically an unproven technology.
The biggest challenge for nuclear fusion right now is to be able to show first that it can create net power, which is power plants that produce more power than they consume in creating nuclear fusion reactions. That's only been shown to work in a lab setting a few times now. It has never been shown in a commercial scale plant.
And even if Commonwealth's magnets tip the scales towards net power, building a full-scale fusion industry is likely to take decades.
So nuclear fusion evokes this idealism because the potential of free, clean energy is enormous. But it is also an idealism because the dream of actually having that is quite far still.
It's difficult to say if all of these very important magnets will help solve the environmental and geopolitical problems we're facing. But one thing's clear. Magnets are not static things. They're evolving, they're improving. We're manipulating the very molecular structure of these materials to make them stronger and better. That's a trajectory we've seen before with things like lithium-ion batteries and computer chips. It's a trajectory that has the potential to create huge businesses and a lot of change.
Magnetism, it's fascinating. It's been a long-time love of mine. It's invisible forces at play that can make such a big impact on the world.